Hello and welcome to Find Your Voice, where we interview thought leaders from our community at Podcast Guesting Pro. I'm Cassandra Welford and today I'm joined by Guy Bartlett. Guy has spent 2 decades helping people buy, build, sell and transition companies. Through Fidelis Advisory, he and his team act as complete M&A capability for business owners who want to grow through acquisition or exit successfully without getting lost in the complexity of the deal process. With 42 years worth of military service alongside his commercial career, it brings a rare mix of discipline, candour and hard-earned experience to the conversation. Guy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cassie. Great to be here.
Looking forward to finding out more about you and your expertise. And I would love to start by asking you, what do most business owners misunderstand about acquisition as a growth strategy?
I would say, from my experience, most people dive in at the wrong point in the process. They will either focus on how do I fund it? How much money do I need? And how do you negotiate a deal? They'll think about all the kind of stories that lots of us have heard about, hard-nosed negotiations and lawyers and all of that sort of the technical aspects, I suppose, of transaction. And what I try to do is to help people to start right at the beginning, but also think about what's the end goal? Why are you doing it? Start with the end in mind. That helps people to take a step back from all of the nitty-gritty and detail and actually go, what am I trying to do here? What's my purpose in doing this? And I say that because when I started, I was just trying to solve a particular growth challenge. I was thinking about if we could buy X, Y, Z, we could grow the business, we could make more money, very much kind of focused on that aspect really, rather than where that was going to take me in a kind of journey.
I love that. Start with the end in mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Good advice to begin with. And with government statistics showing that many companies fail to sell, what practical advice do retiring founders need to make their businesses sale ready?
You've heard me say this before, but essentially I always try and encourage people to think about their business like a sausage machine. So I use the analogy of my local butchers make the best sausages I've ever tasted. Now, the sausages might be a little bit lumpy and a little bit unusual and not like you'd get in a supermarket, not perfect in shape, but you're guaranteed to get the same taste and texture and quality, even if each individual link is a little bit individual. And I think that's a really good analogy, that if your business can make those sausages and turn them out so that they're consistent, and you've got a business which is then much more reliable, much more valuable to a buyer, and easier for someone to step into and to manage the transition. Because actually the hardest part of acquisitions or selling businesses is the transition. Buying or selling the business is in many respects just a mechanical process. It's a step-by-step process. And if you follow it logically, you'll end up at a conclusion. The challenge is then the success or failure of the transition afterwards. That's where it gets much more difficult. And if you look at transactions across the globe, not just in small and medium-sized enterprises, but corporates, all of those things, that's where the risk factors come in. Just as it's difficult to sell a business, it's difficult to transition a business successfully as well. So I think the more an owner can plan for that systemized process that allows people to step away and it'll still generate those sausages, then that's the simplest analogy I can give, really.
I love that. Simple is very good and it's definitely memorable. So when a company has hit a growth ceiling, how can an acquisition unlock momentum that organic growth cannot?
In a number of ways. So founder can set a business up, and I've done it 3 times and grow to multi-7 figures. But naturally, there are a number of what I would call sort of break points or plateau points. First one is the capability and knowledge of the founder. So all of us have a degree of expertise and knowledge and experience that we bring to bear. And there'll naturally come a point where we might run out of that know-how. And then you're faced with the dilemma of, do I try to hire people that have the knowledge gap I don't have, whether that's employing them or whether that's, employing them as consultants. And if you don't know what you don't know, how do you know how to hire them? So that's a real problem. And what I see lots of times over is that business owners who have got a good company, it's making money, it's paying them dividends, often they will stop at that point of knowledge because it's enough, they're doing okay. And that's where the gap sits with an owner. When they reach that point of retirement, it's kind of like, okay, I know there's more capacity in this business, but I've no real incentive to invest that time and money in the risk. So I stop. And if you're ambitious as a business owner, that's where you have to be able to say, if I step into this business, am I going to be able to then take it to the next level? Do I have the knowledge and expertise, or do I have the resources internally or externally that I can tap into to take this Ford Cortina and turn it into a Ford Granada, giving my age away there, but it's that sort of idea really. And I think that's the challenge, both for buyers and sellers. And some sellers are honest enough to go, I don't want to take it to the next level. I'm done. And now it's time for me to exit. And I think for any aspiring buyer, you need to have that honest conversation, because acquisitions are a big distraction apart from anything else. So is your existing business doing okay? Is it working systematically? Is it working, well, your systems and processes in place so that you can spend some time and invest some time in the next level? Because you can't grow organically the speed at which you can grow with acquisition. That's just fundamental. But before you step into that arena, you need to know that your existing business is doing okay and can absorb that extra time and pressure that it's going to bring. If that's not the case, I would urge most people to spend a bit more time to get existing business working well, in order that you've got the headspace and the capacity and perhaps the finances or skill sets or whatever you need to then go to that next level.
Thank you. And when you acquire a business, how do you protect the people inside it so they don't feel like collateral damage in someone else's growth plan?
Great question. It's not easy for a number of reasons. The first one is most founder owners are very nervous when they step into the decision to sell the business for a number of reasons. They know that the business depends heavily on the team that they've recruited and they look after. And naturally, human beings are human beings. We all fear the unknown. So until a business is sold, it's not. Team in the business, if they're aware that the seller is trying to exit and they're not buying it, that creates a whole range of natural concerns where people think, is my job going to be secure? Am I going to be left in the same role? What are the owners going to be like compared to Fred, who I've got to know over the past 10 years, and all of those things. So very often sellers are really reluctant for their staff to know that they're planning to sell. Situations where the day of completion was the day that the staff found out. But that in itself then creates a potential risk for the buyer, because they don't know me from Adam. And they might think, well, I don't really like Guy, so I'm going to go anyway. And then I've got a problem because I'm trying to buy a sausage machine. And if the guy that makes the sausages decides I'm off, then the whole premise of the deal can fall over. And so it's a really difficult balancing act. One of the ways around that is we use profiling tools, something in particular called Contribution Compass, which helps us to understand the natural abilities of the people in the team and how much of the team is complementary. And there's no reason why a seller couldn't ask his team to fill that out on the basis that he's just looking at his people and this is a thing to do, and it's very non-threatening. So whether you use Contribution Compass or use something similar, doing that profiling exercise is really valuable, both for the buyer and the seller, and is a good way if you can't get to meet the people for those reasons, at least you've got an idea who you're stepping into, what the natural abilities and flows of those people might be. So that's probably the first and most important thing to think about in the stages leading up to the transaction. But then afterwards, very often it's a softer approach. It's sort of saying to people, we're not here. Last thing we want to do is lose anybody. We bought it because of the team. We want you to enjoy the job. And one of the techniques that we've used consistently is say, what would be 5 simple things that we could do to make your day-to-day work better from now? Get some amazing stuff comes back, like, could I have another screen for my computer? And you'd be astonished how much that cheers people up. Can I have a bit of flexible working time? Can we work from home from time to time? Simple human things that, if handled properly, make people feel reassured, make people feel valued, but are really almost non-cost effects on the business. Not about spending money as such. I mean, a screen's what, a couple $100? It's really simple things like that. People then start to relax and start to believe that you are there to make things better. So everything is about the human touch. It's not about, P&L and vision boards and all kinds of stuff like that. It's just think at a human level and practice empathy. I always bracket people in businesses kind of 20%, 60%, and 20%. my working thesis based on years of experience is 20% of the people will be a pain in the ass and probably aren't going to last the course. 60%, once they're reassured, will just crack on and do their job and do the 9 to 5, go home, look and live for the weekend. And that's just how it is. But 20% will be your stars. They'll be the people who get excited, get innovated, want to lean in, want to contribute, want to step up to the next level. And the trick is to find out what you've got. Do those percentages ring true? It might be 10 rather than 20, but find what you've got, measure them out, get to know them, understand what makes them tick. Because stepping into that whole region of leadership, what is it that makes people tick? How do you excite people? Because it doesn't matter whether you make widgets in a factory or you run a consultancy. Everything in every business is the people.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And almost taking like a holistic approach to the transaction. It's the people and the business.
Because then I promise anyone watching this, the numbers will flow if you get the people right. They just will. But if you don't get the people right, or you don't understand that, or you pay lip service to it, sometimes people joke about HR meaning human remains. You got to, in this day and age, you cannot afford to not develop the skill as a business leader around people. And if it's not you, if that isn't your natural flow, you have to have someone on your team who is good at it, because you just risk losing people, and then the numbers won't flow. The business won't succeed. And all your careful planning, another phrase I use, Cassie, is no one ever produced a spreadsheet. It didn't look good. But the gap between a nice looking spreadsheet with a really chunky, profit figure at the end of it and reality is significant, because it's people that make that spreadsheet turn into real numbers in the bank. So it's such an important part of the whole process, really.
It's clear from listening to you speak, like just how much experience you've got around this. And I would love to know what your military background has taught you about staying clear-headed during these negotiations.
Well, from exercises to real operations, I can vividly think straight away of exercises I've been on, particularly where you're doing what used to be called FIBUA, it's now called OBUA, but fighting in built-up areas or operations in built-up areas, where there's a whole military process for an attacking force to fight their way through a village, and the army's built big villages that are used for this purpose to train soldiers, and the speed slows down massively. Communication gets confused, people get confused, you lose momentum, you haven't got your supply chain worked out, people run out of ammunition, people are getting injured. How do you CASEVAC? It's chaos, absolute chaos. And again, that planning metric, the Army's got a great phrase, no plan survives contact with the enemy. You can have the perfect plan, everyone's briefed, everyone's ready to go, and then the first round goes down and it all goes pear-shaped. And I think business is very similar to that, really. So the Army talks about selection and maintenance of the aim. So being clear about what you're trying to do and how do you maintain that when the bullets are coming at you is great transferable skill, really, from the military to civilian life. I can think of multiple occasions in businesses that I've run where a key person doesn't turn up on a Monday, and all your careful planning for the week just goes out the window, and your client's screaming down the phone saying everything's planned. In construction, for example, you might have a crane costing 1,500 quid a day that can't do its job because Fred the scaffolder hasn't turned up, and suddenly you got consequential costs arising from that because Fred decided to go out on the lash on Sunday night and couldn't get out of bed on Monday morning. And that's people. Yeah. That is literally people. So what do? You might be trying to plan a team meeting on a Monday morning where you're going to do all your nice planning and set the week out, and then the phone goes and you gets dropped and you've got to respond to the bullets from coming down from the enemy, kind of thing. So all of that capability, and how do you keep a clear head? Well, you keep a clear head with, like I said, selection and maintenance of the aim, having flexibility in your plan, contingency planning. And these are all good operational skills, but this comes back to people. It's having people in your team that are trained to think like that, trained to be adaptable, trained to expect the worst, plan for the best and expect the worst, and then adapt around it. It doesn't matter whether it's running a business or buying a business. It's kind of the same thing. You could be doing due diligence and the seller might have said to you, yeah, we'll have 300 grand in the bank at completion. And then when you drill down into the bank account and you look at the numbers, you go, actually, it's more like 150. Yet still they want the same figure on the day of completion. And all of a sudden it's like, well, how do we navigate this? And these are all real things that will happen in a business. and in a negotiation. So you need patience, you need massive amounts of resilience, you need the ability to explore challenges without getting too emotional and frustrated, which is not easy. The ability to step back, think it through, and sometimes time is a pressure. We're all human beings. We all experience emotion. It's recognizing how you're feeling, why you're feeling, what can you do about it. And this is where I love Stoic philosophy. It's not that things will happen, it's how you respond to the things that happen.
That's really powerful. And if someone listening is thinking that they would like to look into an acquisition, what would be a good first step for them?
Again, very simply, start with why. Why do you want to do it? If it's to grow your business, if it's part of a strategy with a view to a financial exit, I'd always start with, okay, so do you know how much money you need to achieve financial freedom? Most people start a business because they yearn for financial freedom and they yearn for being in control. The irony is that when you start a business, probably neither. It's a lot harder than people think. And you end up working for a lunatic, i.e. yourself, because most founders will drive themselves much harder than any boss would do. So really, it's a case of saying, okay, what is my realistic number? What point am I now actually genuinely financially free? And I don't have to get up in the morning and I don't have to do certain things. So I think it's critical that you understand what that number is. And then that helps you decide what kind of business you might want to buy, why you want to buy it, because it's in context. If I bought companies because I could, not because I should. And then I've repented at leisure. Shouldn't have bought that one. And it's not like a property. You buy a house, maybe as an investment, realize it's not really working, and you just stick it in the auction for a bit of loss, maybe, and move on. But a business is people. You buy a business and it doesn't work out. You're dealing with people's lives. There's financial connotations. But more importantly, there are people in that business who've got bills to pay and mortgages to look after and all that sort of stuff. So you have to be really clear that it's the right transaction, not just for the sake of it. And does that transaction move you towards that end result? That's really the most important thing at the start of anything.
Start with the end in mind,
Always.
which is kind of where we started
Always.
at the beginning of this interview. Amazing. And before we wrap up, I'd love to ask a question about your podcast journey. I know it's very early days, but what has inspired you to want to speak on podcasts as part of your business strategy?
I've had so many people over the years ask me, how do you do what you do? And how could I do it? And I've realized the best way to reach more people is to be on more podcasts, to be fair. So it's that ability to share my story and experiences, not from an ego point of view, but just try to help people. The more I can spread the experience, especially the mistakes that I've made, things I got right, things I got wrong, and try to help more sellers and buyers to have a better outcome, then that's really the motivation. And podcasting is obviously the best way I can think of to reach more people.
It's having those quality conversations, isn't it? Rather than a 7-second snapshot on a scroll on social media. It's a quality conversation. What you're speaking about, there's so much depth to it that you need that conversation to get a really good understanding. And then if people want to then follow up and take the next step, that leads me on to my final question. How can people connect with you, Guy?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. If you go and find me on LinkedIn, Guy Bartlett 1, should be able to recognize my face. I post daily. There's always stuff going on there, articles, content, etc. So it's a great way to see the way that I talk about stuff. Subscribe to my newsletter that's on LinkedIn, and you'll get regular thought leadership, ideas there. You'll also see a connection to my link tree, which gives you all the different access points to me and the things that I do. So I'd love to connect that way, really. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. So most of the platforms. Don't do TikTok. I'm too old.
Perfect. You've shared plenty of ways, Guy, and thank you so much for sharing the valuable insights. And we want to wish you all the best with your continued success and really look forward to continuing working with you.
Thanks, Cassie. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. And thank you for listening.